All right, this is Unit 5, Form 1, Video 3. We're factoring trinomials again. However, this time there will be a GCF, which is a greatest common factor. Okay, so the big hint with the GCF is you guys see this first term? Okay, in Algebra 1, this will always be a prime number. Okay, so remember a prime number is a number that only 1 in itself will go into. Okay, and this is 10. So 1, 10, 5, and 2 will go into it. Okay, so that should tell you that there is a number we got to factor out prior to doing our two parentheses and factoring the trinomial. Okay, so I have a 10, 64, and 24. Okay, the only thing I know that'll go into all of them is a 2. So I'm going to factor a 2 out. Okay, remember when you factor 2 out, it's like dividing by 2. Okay? And when I do that, that's going to come outside my parentheses. So now I have 10w squared divided by 2, which is 5w squared, and then negative 64w divided by 2, which gives me negative 32w, and then 24 divided by 2 is 12. Okay, so always double check in here, is there another number besides 1 that'll go into the 3 of those? And there's not. Okay, so now I can start factoring my trinomial. So I'm going to do my two parentheses. Okay, so I'm going to split up my 5w. Okay, remember it's prime, so it's going to be 5w and w. So I have my chart. Remember this is a times c, and this equals b. So we have a times c, so 5 times 12, okay, is going to be 60. And my middle term is negative 32. Okay, so a couple things you need to remember here. I want to multiply two numbers to get a positive 60, but when I add them, I get a negative number. So you should know that the two numbers you multiply both have to be negative. Okay, so let's go. Again, we're going to start with negative 1 and negative 60, and I get negative 61. Okay, that doesn't work. So negative 2 and negative 30 gives me negative 32, and that's what I want. So that was pretty fast. Okay, so these are the numbers I want. Okay. Now remember we have a 5 here, so we're going to have to draw our brackets. Which one of these numbers will 5 go into? And it's negative 30. So I'm going to have to attach the 5 with a negative 30. And then this has to be a negative 2. Okay. So to get the negative 30, you have to take 5 times what equals negative 30. And that's going to be a negative 6. Okay. Now on the inside, you have a negative 2 here. Remember, this is a 1. So this would have to be a negative 2. Okay. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Okay. And then this is my answer. Don't forget when you factor the 2 that you have to bring that down, otherwise the problem is not correct. We should be able to multiply this completely out and get our original problem. Okay. All right, let's try another one. All right, so we have negative 6x squared plus 4x plus 16. Now a couple things we haven't hit is this is a leading negative. Our a should never be a leading negative. Okay. So first of all, 6, 4, and 16, 2 will go into them. Now I don't want this to be a negative 6, so I'm going to factor out a negative 2. Okay. So the big hint is if your leading a is a negative, you're going to factor out a negative number. Okay. All right, so that would give me 3x squared minus 2x minus 8. Now we're going to break them up. And again, your 3x squared is 3x and x. Let's do our table. So we have a times c, so our 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. And we're going to add to the middle, which is a negative 2. All right. So negative 1 and 24. Okay, because again, you want to multiply to get a negative, so one's got to be a negative and one's got to be a positive. That gives me 23. Negative 2 and 12 gives me a 10. Negative 3 and 8 gives me 5, still not a negative 2. Negative 4 and 6 gives me a 2. Okay, so I'm close, right? Because I want a negative 2. So again, okay, if we want a negative 2 here, we're going to switch our negatives. So let's go 4 and negative 6, and that gives me a negative 2. So here are my problem. Okay. Now, which one of these will 3 go into? And 3 will go into negative 6, so I'm going to attach my negative 6 to the 3, and this would be a 4. So 3 times what is negative 6? That is going to be a negative 2. And then what times 1, okay, remember that's a 1, is going to give you a 4 here. So that would have to be a 4. And then this is my answer. Last. All right, so let's take a look. So, okay, so A is a leading positive, so that's good. Now 9, 3, and 30, I know 3 will go into all of those. Okay, so I'm going to factor out my 3, which means to divide. I'm going to go ahead and put a 1R. If you don't, that's fine. Okay. And then this is your B, so split them up. Okay, to get 3R squared, I have to take 3R times R. And now A times C is negative 30. And then we want it to equal 1. Okay. So again, some of you guys might see the factors right away, so just go straight to it. You don't have to do the 1s and 2s if you already know the answers. So negative 1 and 30 gives me 29. Negative 2 and 15 gives me 13. Negative 3 and 10 gives me 7. 4 won't go in, 5 will. Negative 5 and 6 gives me a 1. And that's what I wanted, is a 1 up here. So I found my problem. Okay. Now, which one of these will this 3 go into? Negative 5 or 6? And it's a 6, so I'm going to have to attach my 6 to the 3. And this will be a negative 5. So what times 3 equals 6? And that's a 2. And most of you guys have figured out right here, this negative 5, this is always a 1. So the negative 5 actually just is brought up all the time. Okay, and there's your answer. All right, so that's factoring trinomials with a GCF.